Suburban Conference Visual Arts exhibit this month. Congratulations to Alexis Bauer from South, who earned the Award of Excellence. And also congratulations to Ava Blazechek and Kate Haggerty from Lakeville North, who earned awards of achievement. We also want to congratulate 13 of our high school students from Lakeville North and South high schools who won awards in the 2023 Minnesota Scholastic Art Awards. Some of the top key gold key honors went to Alexis Bauer, Millie Vazica, Alice Yee and Lakeville South, and Lena Shen at Lakeville North. Also, we want to send congratulations to our Lakeville North High School junior. Now, I apologize if I mess up some of these names. I'm doing the best I can. I'll get phonetically better as we go. Amaya Kajwa, who has been selected by the Minnesota State High School League as one of this year's Excel Award recipients. The Excellence in Community Education and Leadership Recognition Program is designed exclusively for Minnesota high school juniors who are active in school activities, show leadership qualities, and do volunteer work in their community. And so that was from the MSHSL Excel Award winners. Lakeville South Encore in New York City. Congratulations to Lakeville South Encore Group, which took second place at the String Strong a cappella festival in New York City earlier this month. In addition to the runner-up finish, tenor soloist Javier Hansen Sanchez was voted best male vocalist. Lakeville Cheer has been at state. The Lakeville Cheer program did exceptionally well at the MCCA state competition in late January. The elementary competition squad took second place. The junior high competition squad took second place. And the varsity competition squad took third place in varsity tumbling. Coach Shelby Weiss was also named the 2023 MCCA Coach of the Year. We also have a couple Teacher of the Year candidates. Lakeville Area Schools is proud to have two staff members who've been named candidates for the 2023 Minnesota Teacher of the Year. Carrie Raymond is a math teacher at Lakeville North High School, and Sherry Peterson is an Intermediate School District 917 special education teacher who works with students at Christine Huddleston Elementary. The Minnesota Teacher of the Year will be named in May. So congratulations and great job to all of those folks and for everybody else who's been doing what they're supposed to this school year.
So amazing to hear all the good things that are going on in our district. For board communications tonight, we had one person that participated in public engagement. We had a discussion around procedures for evaluating licensed staff and how the parents and students could participate in that, or what the process was for that. Our next board meeting is scheduled to happen on March 13th at 6 p.m. Because we had to change the date from our 14th meeting due to an election that's happening that night. So we're switching from our 14th date to March 13th at 6 p.m., just for clarification on that. For agenda additions, do we have any agenda additions from board members tonight? Nope. Okay. All right. We'll move on. Are there any items on the consent agenda that board members would like to remove for further discussion? Oh, can. Okay. Okay, sorry, out of order there. Can we have approval for someone to approve the consent
Madam
agenda?
Chairman?
Sorry.
Yes. I would like to pull employment recommendations, leave requests, and resignations.
Hang one second.
Approve the agenda, not the consent.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we got to approve the whole agenda.
Oh, I thought we already did. All right.
My fault. I apologize. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
So moved.
I'll second.
Approval of the agenda, motion by Director Lind and seconded by Director Anderson. So then we'll move on to, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. All right, so we will move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that board members would like to remove for further discussion?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to pull employment recommendations, leave requests, and resignations. I would like to pull payments of bills and claims. I would like to pull change orders. I would like to pull policy updates 530, 506, 514, 515, 516. I would like to pull MOA with EML and MOU with LEAF. I would like to pull 917, notice of election. And I would like to pull student iPad lease renewal.
changes that.
Can we review those just to make sure that we have all of those?
Use the letters.
Use the letters,
Just
yeah.
use
that
the
would be
letters.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, I'd like to pull B for Brian, C, the letter E, letter I, letter J, letter L, and M.
Right. Are there any other items that board members would like to remove from the consent agenda for further discussion? No? Okay. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda minus items B, C, E, I, J, L, and M?
So moved.
I will make a motion, I will make, do you want to list off the ones you're accepting?
Oh,
Make a
okay.
motion to accept.
Let's see what I said.
Yep. go.
I motion to approve A, D, F, G, H, and K, if I did my circles correct.
I think so. Yes.
And I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Director Carly Anderson and a second by Director Kelleher to approve the consent agenda with those items minus B, E, I, J, L, M, and C. Now we'll move on for discussion of those. Director Thompson, oh, we got to vote. I'm sorry. I had a lot of coffee this evening. Do I have all in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So Director Thompson, we'll move on discussion of your first one, which would be employment recommendations, letter B.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks. So Madam Chairman, I pulled this one out of the consent agenda just so that I have an opportunity to share my point of view. While I appreciate the average stakeholder and myself being able to see an itemized list of all HR transactions, from a school board member point of view, it doesn't provide me a very holistic view of why I am asked to approve all 112 transactions. To me, as a school board member, our role is to provide governance of our schools, and that includes personal matters. So in my business professional experiences, I normally review monthly requisition governance reports that highlight backfills, net neutral, and/or net new metrics. We have key HR performance indicators that provide resource trends, percentages of allocations per business units, and a 12-month run rate of resource capacity and how we are compared versus in actuals. And so at this time, I have yet to see any existing metrics or dashboards that we may or may not have in place that as a school board and our community could review to provide a high-level overview and governance of the state of our HR general practices, like an executive summary of some sort. So right now, what I see in this list is 62 transactions, 50 individuals for recommendations for coaches and advisors, but again, no executive school board summary. So I'm not sure if our HR practices are in a good shape or not a good shape. Are we short on second grade teachers or not on second grade teachers? So I understand that a school board, our role is not to get into the management, and I get that. But from a school board perspective, having a high-level understanding of our key metrics and where we're going, it would go a long ways for me from a governance perspective. For now, as we work together, I'm looking forward to I'm looking for and hope for more transparency to share for myself along with our community. And so, for now, I make a motion to pass the employment recommendation, leave request, and resignation proposal.
So,
What?
Can I just, and if other board members want to chime in, I guess my question is this. Again, from an administrative perspective, that's what we're providing you, as I wrote to the board. This is information for you from what the administration does. This is not something that you govern. It's an awareness. Normally what you will get at some point during the year, normally in my experience, you get something in the fall or in the summer that says, here's how many positions we've had open. Here's a process in which we go to fill those positions. Here's how many new staff we've hired. Here's how many people resign. You get that general overview, but the hiring of staff and the transitions that they go through in many of these are based off the contractual obligations that we already have with them that you as a board approve. So this is really an administrative responsibility that we're just making you aware of so that you can see how we follow the guidance and direction of our contracts. And again, as I wrote, if this is something you want more in-depth discussion about, then that's probably a work session conversation, not necessarily a official board meeting conversation.
Chair?
Yes, Director Keller.
So I agree. So the information that you're seeking, we do get. If there's, at the beginning, over the summer, before the school year starts, we get updates and we talk about the staffing that we need, when we need them, where we need them, which schools, what grade levels, all of that is addressed. So what we're looking at today is just an awareness piece, so we see the movement that our staff is having. Yeah. It's not a fact of whether we have enough second graders at this point. If we're running out of second grade teachers, that would come before us to bring on additional staff if they're needed, more staff across the district. So what you're requesting is provided at the right time and place when we need to be doing staffing and doing staff reviews. And Brenda and team are constantly watching what's happening in our buildings. And if additional staff is needed beyond what we've already approved, it will be brought to us for another approval. So this is just for awareness. I believe you made a motion, and I'll make a second.
All right, so we have a motion by Director Thompson to approve, a second by Director Kelleher. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, so we'll move on to the next item for discussion. Director Thompson would be letter C, payment of bills and claims.
Yep. So again, I pulled this out of the consent agenda to share my point of view as well, similar to the HR transactions. While I do appreciate the itemized list of all the financial transactions, again, this does not provide me a holistic view of why these are being approved or why these need to be approved. While we may get 4 or 5 financial reports, for me, from a governance point of view, that's just not enough. Again, from my professional experience, I review monthly finance report outs that share 12-month rolling budgets versus actuals, as well as key categories and subcategories of all operations. The key documents that we see in this agenda packet were high level and at the fund balance level, and it does not provide the level of detail that I'm looking for. Executive summaries that highlight these key variances could also be included in these packets for general awareness for myself and for the community. And so now I'm still obviously new into the space. Governance oversight generally includes this level of transparency. As a resident of Lakeville, probably reviewing an 8-page itemized list in the P-card statements and 42 pages of the check register is probably cumbersome. It is for me. We spent $8 million between January 17th through the 15th, but not sure. But I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. To provide key oversight and governance, the board bills and claims page is not enough for me. So again, I am just sharing my point of view as I look through the packet in the lens of a general stakeholder. Again, I will approve the February 28th request, but look forward to a more digestible content for March. I make a motion to pass the payments of bills and claims proposal.
Is there any other discussion around that item?
I guess I would add the same thing. Again, from a governance vantage point, you as a board approve the overall budget. How that budget is expended and utilized is taken care of on a daily operation. And so what Bill presents to you, which he's required to do, are the bills that have to be approved. Many of them, if you take a look, have already gone through the process because they're through contracts or salaries, but it's still legal that we have to bring it to you. So that's why we have to present those things to you. That's not, again, and then he presents several reports to you throughout the year on some of those very things that you mentioned. So again, this is a daily operations component that we're required to show you, but also as an awareness of where those dollars go in case people were, it is very detailed and it may be a lot of pages, but that's what we're required to show you.
Any other discussion around that item? All right, so we have a motion by Director Thompson to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll make a second.
Second by Director Kelleher. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, so our next item for discussion is letter E, change orders. Director Thompson?
Yes, all right. The most recent Highview Elementary PowerPoint that was shared on the packet was better than the previous one, so thank you. I think it's good to see construction days progressing along to day 143 with 286 days remaining. And it looks like, I believe what I read was that the substantial completion date is targeting April 11th of 24. Again, with a business hat strategy on, I feel that we are probably still missing some pertinent information on this PowerPoint slide. We should be, my recommendation would, for myself, would be helpful to have some more project management best practices document inputs into these large-scale investments. This PowerPoint doesn't show any core categories of work streams. Again, I'm not in the construction business, but are there core work streams that contribute into the development of this large-scale project, like the foundation or the roughing or electrical or roofing or something of that nature? So I'm not an expert, but I think it may be good to see our financials listed here as well. It shows how much we have spent, how much we have remaining, but does not show that if we have enough. And so having these work streams or each categories of work that make up the broader project and knowing the progression of that would be good for transparency. Again, that is project management principles that I've seen past been successful in larger projects. So again, at the end of the day, the intent here is that let's add a bit more transparency for our community on what $46,370,000 will get them in a new elementary school. For now, I will approve the change order and look forward to potentially some more project management inputs into the PowerPoint slide. I make a motion to pass the change order request.
Is there any further discussion on this item?
Yes, ma'am. Again, that is an administrative responsibility. You as a board approve the overall budget for the school. Our responsibility is then to administratively follow what that budget is. So when you say, is it enough money? It is enough money unless we come to you and have to ask for more. So you have to know that that budget is established. You work with the people that are Loeffler, Wold, other people to make sure that they stay within the confines of that budget. Because if they don't, then we'd have to come back and say, hey, here's what we have to do. You as a board would have to approve that or make reductions in the scope. And ultimately, having done buildings in multiple places, the people will actually see what $46 million gets them when that building is completed and walk into it and see what's there. They're not going to see the furnace and they're not going to see the roof and those type of things. That's just part of the building. They actually get to see the $46 million when that facility is completed, and by, I think, some of the pictures that have been presented as far as the process of the phases that they're going through. But I do agree that we can have Loeffler or Wold or somebody come in and do a quarterly or periodic update if there's some other things that you want, either as part of a work session or even as part of this, that can provide some of that for you. But the overall components of a budget was already approved by the board, and we have to administratively stay within that, and that's what your project managers that have been hired to oversee at Loeffler and others help us manage that as well.
Director Keller?
So, thank you, and we have had Loeffler here in the past and Wold in the group kind of giving an update on where they're at with the process, and it would be a good recommendation to have them come in and have you guys help understand what the timing of the process is, not just for the new building, but for future facility planning. But the one thing that I just need to clarify, Brian, you keep using the word transparency, and I just want to make sure everybody understands we are extremely transparent with our practices and as a public school system with our information. This information is available to anybody and everybody when they ask for it, and we make it readily available. Our website houses a lot of the budget and finance department details, probably far more than a lot of school districts around here do. And we open up our books to everybody. So we are extremely transparent. not just because we have to be, but because we are, and we exceed the transparency that most school districts around here do. So I appreciate the work that our administration does in all these areas. And, Brian, I know you missed some of the onboarding when we talked about governance and we talked about some of these things and when the departments met with all of the new board members. So just take some time to learn and make your requests after you've learned more about what the process is and our role is as a board member.
Director Thompson?
Yeah, I do
I will second
agree.
that. I
As
will second the motion then.
Hey, can you
I'm
pause? Can you-
seconding the motion. We have a motion and a second.
All right,
Discussion.
that's true.
Go ahead, Director Thompson.
No, I was going to say that I understand. I mean, the board as a whole, yes, we approve the budget, but keep in mind, as a school board, our role is also to govern. So if you exclude oversight on the budget that's been approved, that's not governing. And so I do feel that while I am newer, there might be different definitions or expectations of governance, and I look forward to working together as we kind of figure that out together.
Director Thompson, just so you're aware, I have spoken with Dr. Van Zyl about having an update for the board at a working session, so we will have that coming up soon.
Great.
Awesome. All right, we have a motion by Director Thompson, a second by Director Kelleher. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item for discussion is letter I, which would be policy updates. Director Thompson?
Yeah, so I am pulling these. I'd like to pull the policy updates out. At the last working session, there was a direction that I think the school board wanted to go, where we review these policies as a unit, as a team. And so my recommendation would to pull these out and then have these 5 go through the policy review process for that we put together or agreed upon as a school board unit. So that is why I pulled those out and would like to have them go through that process.
Okay, just, I'll speak to that. For policy updates, we did talk about that as a board at our last working session, and the policies that the board decided to focus on at this time are the 200 series. Those policies were removed prior to this meeting so that the board could discuss that further. There was no discussion any further about any of the other policies at this point. We were just looking at the 200 series.
Yeah.
Director Lind?
Yeah, these 500 series, there's no changes per se. There's some wording, there may be some statutory wording changes. And they aren't changing the policy, so that's why they are on a consent agenda. Now, there are some concerns by board members to review some of these 500 series, and my recommendation is, once we approve
Updated
The
language.
legal changes.
yeah, these current policies with no changes except wording, then we should look at them in a work session. So I don't have any problem approving these policies at this time.
Who was first?
Okay.
Director Kelleher?
Yeah, and the wording that's being changed here doesn't change the purpose, the intent, or the scope of what the policy does.
Correct.
It just maybe realigns some of the wording to what we use in the district, or maybe something that legally needs to be termed, but it's not changing the intent of the policy. And so if others want, I would recommend that we move forward approving that, even if we want to review them later for what the purpose is and have a bigger policy discussion around them. But they also tie in very nicely to the student management report that the old board got back in December that might be worth bringing to this new board to help them understand how these policies tie into that student management handbook. The one thing that I would like to make on these, though, from a language or a wording, is in MSBA's model policies and in what we see here, we're being referred to as a school board, and technically in our website, communications, and all of our other policies, our documents, our handbook, we're referred to as the Board of Education. So I would like to make a motion to approve these policies with the changes of making school board, Board of Education throughout them. And then if there's further discussion down the road to tie this into our student management, we have a future learning session on that.
Okay.
Can I add
Director
one point?
Lind?
Yes. For the
Madam Chairman,
public-
there's a motion on the floor.
For the public to know, we're still discussing, I think, for the public to know, when we do make changes in policies that are significant changes, they have to come before the board for a first reading, and then at the next board meeting, it comes for a second reading. We have some input on how we might change it, make it better, or we just approve it. But it gives the public the idea and knowledge of what's happening or what's changing in that particular policy. Thank you.
There's a motion.
There's two, right? Technically, there's two motions on the floor because we
Can
have
I ask a
the
quick
regular
question?
motion to approve and then this,
You
your
amended.
motion to change the wording,
Can I ask?
right?
Can we get through discussion about this before we make motions?
I think what you have is you had a motion and then some discussion and then another motion. So basically what you have to do is either ask the board members if they're willing to rescind their motion and get to one motion rather than having two of them on the floor. So just, I think, rule of order, I think that would be the process you'd have to do instead of having, because you can't have two of them
I
at the
don't
same
think
time.
he made a motion.
I did not make a
He
motion.
didn't make a motion.
No, I said
Sorry,
the
no.
reasoning behind it.
No,
I
he didn't
believe.
make, he didn't make a
But
motion.
then you only have the one motion
I
from.
made a
from-
motion.
Then
Yeah.
you're still fine.
Okay, so we're,
Yeah.
so then the motion is on the table that is up
It-
for.
It is, but we do have someone that would like to speak. Director Anderson?
Which one? I think
Director
she was
Carly
We both
Anderson
have-
was
we can go
first.
You sure?
Arm wrestle.
I'll go back.
Am I missing something on what was changed in here? Because we can't really,
So something I think would be helpful going forward
Redlining
is
it or
having
something
it
like-
redlined.
yes.
Yeah.
Basic, when you look at that form, there's an issue paper that says, here's what the policy was, and I don't know, Brenda, if you want to speak to it or not, you can. She listed out, here is the policy, here is what the changes were, and they were minor changes to that. So there really wasn't a whole lot of redlining to these. She did try to list specifically what changed in each one of the policies. The only other comment that I would make in regard to Board of Education or school board,
Yep.
sometimes there's statutory language that is part of the policy, and we'll have to adopt whatever that statutory language is, however they refer to
Yes.
it legally. So if there's a component of the policy, people just have to know that sometimes whatever you decide, what the motion that you made,
Yes.
if the statute says Board of Education or School Board, I forget which way you
Correct.
wrote it, we'll
Yep.
have to make sure that the statutory language, if it's part of the policy, is in
Yes,
there.
thank you for that clarification. That's absolutely right, because statutorily, school boards are school boards, but some are Board of Education, and that's what we are, or we have been. So, but yes, you're correct.
All right. Any further discussion on this item?
I just want to say one thing.
All right, go ahead, Carly Anderson.
So I just want to make it clear that I think I support obviously making these minor changes, and I like everybody's kind of comments about doing a work session, but I think I would like to get that identified in terms of kind of when these updates with the handbook are coming, and then we can match it with that and have a plan for that. Because to me, when we talk about some of these policies specifically, there's work for us to do, and I want to get that on the books. So that'd be my expressed preference, that we coordinate with Dave and Megan about kind of when that final handbook is coming out.
And I think to the point that was made, we maybe need to, since we have several new board members, is maybe bring that conversation back to you so they can explain what they did in the fall to the board before you, so that you can hear that, and that will help, I think, answer that question for you.
Well, just making sure those things, the policy aligns obviously with the handbook, so, yeah.
Any further discussion? Okay, so the motion that we have on the floor.
Point of information. Can
Sorry.
we repeat the motion
I
that?
was trying to.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry. So the motion that we have on the floor right now from Director Kelleher is to approve the policies with any updates that we can do for consistency, making the terminology Board of Education instead of School Board. Obviously, making sure that we are in compliance with state statute when we do that, but to make that for consistency across our website.
Well,
Do we have
across
a-
these policies.
Right, across the policies, sorry.
Consistent with the rest of the communications.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so the motion was by Director Kelleher, the second was by Director Lind. All in favor?
Point of information. I just want to make sure that there's acknowledgement and understanding that it's not just the Board of Education that's changed. There's significant content that's been included in quite a few of these documents as well. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page that we are just approving the school board change. Is that my understanding?
No.
No.
Because that's how
No.
I interpreted the motion.
No, we're accepting the policies, and there wasn't significant additions. There were just word changes to policies.
So
Approving aye.
I believe as I'm looking through student discipline 506, there's a paragraphs that are added. Like there are, it's not just grammatical changes if that's what people think this is. So, okay.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
All right, so we have 6 in favor and 1 opposed. Motion carries. Next item for discussion is letter J, MOA with EML and the MOU with LEAF. Director Thompson?
Yes, I pulled this one just so that we have transparency around what this is for those who may have not read it. From my understanding, there are 2 agreements that we were making with one with EML and one with LEAF. The one that I've got questions around, we just want to get clarification that is it teachers that are wanting to retire before March 8th, that the MOA with EML was that we would provide a $500 bonus incentive. And I just want to make sure I understood that correctly.
You have a couple of items on there. The one in regard to the 500, I believe, is to the LEAF group, is it not? Brenda, am I wrong on that? I can pull it up here a second.
I think it's that they notify within that, so as long as and that would be to do the backfill.
So pulling that up in front of me, oops, sorry. We do have the 2 that if they notified us early, they were going to be getting, because technically they don't have to notify us at that date. They could actually drag it out and notify us later on.
Yep.
So we have the $500 to notify us by that date, and if people, and an incentive is the other component. Both of these have to be agreed upon by the association. So this is just starting the process. So just because you approve it tonight, unless the associations agree to them,
Yep.
they don't go anywhere.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Director Thompson?
Yeah, I was just curious because I saw that and I saw the incentive one and I was confused why they were broken out in 2 instead of just 1, and if there was a reason behind that.
Because if they notify us early, to me, there's a benefit. The other one has a cap on it, or a floor on it that says we have to get at least 25 people to notify us of the early retirement incentive before that gets paid out. So people that take the steps to say, hey, regardless, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to be leaving the district, retiring, we can then start looking at how do we fill those positions, because it's a very difficult hiring market in education nowadays. So there's a benefit to getting them to notify us early, but there's also that floor on the other one that says they have to have a minimum of 25 in order for that $8,000 to get paid out. So the 500 gets paid out as long as they notify us in advance, which is hopefully an incentive to somebody's, like, instead of waiting until May or June to tell us, they're going to hopefully say, well, $500, I know I'm going to retire anyway. Let me notify the district so that we can actually start the hiring process.
Any further discussion?
No, I just want to make a comment. This was something that we kind of discussed when we talked about the budget during our last work session, so.
You're correct. Do we have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Director Thompson makes the motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director David Anderson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item for discussion would be letter L, which is the 917 notice of election. Director Thompson?
Yeah, so I pulled this out, so again, to provide a talking point for our community around what this is. So 917 provides high-quality, equitable, and specializing program. We have about 90 students that are part of 917, and we use them for 2 purposes generally. One, purchases of services that are based on a child's IEP that we may not have, and then also placements of students into programs the child needs based off their IEP. So we have funds that go in that direction, and we have a vested interest in 917 success. And so with that being said, I think it's important that we have an active member of the school board as part of that relationship. There are 9 member school districts that are part of 917, so Burnsville, Farmington, Hastings, and so forth. And so I want to acknowledge and be grateful that we have a member of our school board who is knowledgeable in the special education space. So David Anderson, who is an active school board member, has volunteered to be our school district representative. And again, like I said, with his background in special education and also a member of our Lakeville School Board, I think he would be a great fit for this position.
All right, Director Carly Anderson?
Yeah, I do think this is good to pull out based on, I think from my perspective, this was something that was brought up at a work session a while back, but I don't think we ever really talked about it very comprehensively as a group. And so I had questions that I would have asked during that time, like how did this come to be in terms of it could either be a community member serving in this role or a school board member. What are the advantages and disadvantages of a school board member who already has a role on this board to be serving in both boards? And as far as I understood the last time we talked about it, Dr. Faber, who is the chair of that district, had preferred, or superintendent, I'm sorry, superintendent of that district had preferred that Kathy stay on as the acting person. And so my question would be kind of, I guess my question is how we got to this place and why we didn't talk about it more as a board.
Any discussion? Director Kelleher?
And I also have a concern with the notice of the election. Although I understand that David has special education, so does our current representative. And my concern is the time commitment that's here. Dave, I'd like to know if you're really going to, if you are aware of what the extensive time commitment is. I know in the past you've asked a lot about this board meeting less because of our time commitment, and this one is twice as much as our current board. So I'm concerned about that, and I know that our last 3 representatives between Cheryl Forrest, Kathy Lewis, and Bob Erickson, their involvement has been extensive here. And I'm also concerned that the superintendent is preferring to have Kathy stay on because of her nursing experience, and that's a key role for that, as well as she has special needs in her family as well. So I just want to make sure that we're not going to lose the commitment that we have. And it doesn't matter whether that person is on this board or not on the board. We've had community members, and some of these other district members have non-board members on it because of the time commitment. So I guess I'm not sure that we've really mulled this one over well enough to understand if we will have the continued strong representation that we've had.
Can I say one more thing?
Director Carly Anderson?
It's not at all to question your expertise or anything. I'm just trying to say that we didn't discuss it. And I think we would benefit from more discussion. So it's not that I'm questioning your background in special ed or what you could bring to the board, because I think you would bring a different perspective, just more how we got from this place to that place.
Director Thompson?
Yeah, I get that, that maybe other individuals have been in it and they have different timelines, different flexibility, different lifestyles, and so forth. So I would assume that one of our Madam Chairwoman, that if a member of our board volunteered and raised their hand to be a part of this, let's take advantage of that. Let's acknowledge that and celebrate his willingness to participate. More importantly, we have 90 students that are part of this space. We have money allocated in that direction. If money is being sent in that direction, it would be ideal to have a school board member who's been elected by the community to represent us, should also be an individual who represents our community at 917. So I make a motion to pass this request.
Director Lynn, did you have something to say?
I'd just like to add just that it's my understanding that both Kathy and Dave have met and have agreed to a transition period. So I wonder if all this conversation is moot.
Yep.
But
Okay, so-
again, I think my concern is we never talked about it as a board.
Yeah, I understand your concern, that's
So
different.
I would
Yeah, I get
rather, and I know I can't make any motion at this point, but I think what I want to be very clear about is if we go forth in voting, it's not me voting against, it's more me wanting to push this to a work session where we can discuss it and then vote on it at the next meeting.
Just to,
I made a
just to,
motion.
just to bring you back, you did have a conversation at a work session about 9/17 several months ago. And at that time, it was kind of left that David was going to visit with Kathy. And that was the conversation that took place. And then that was actually, I think, in your January board meeting, that you had that work session conversation. And then I think there was some discussion, and then there were some questions back and forth, so it didn't happen at the January board meeting. Otherwise, I think it was going to have been addressed back then. That was the meeting I missed. I was out for that January meeting, but it was on your agenda to do it then. It got removed, and so I think that's part of the time that's lapsed in between. It is probably part of that concern as well. So, but I do know that David has visited with Kathy. I'm not going to speak for him, but to Terry's point, I know that there was that conversation, and I did visit with Dr. Favor. I shared with you what he shared. They're the ones who drafted the paperwork that you have in front of you now based upon what I was told. So it doesn't have anything that I've done as a district or we've done as a district other than I've taken whatever guidance I was given and asked 917 to put that in this document for you.
I guess my commitment to special education can speak for itself. I'm not going to dignify some of the comments here tonight. But if you want to pull it to discuss it more at a work session, that's fine with me. Kathy and I did discuss this. The only thing that did change was Dr. Faber wanted it July 1st, and we had agreed on December, just to make that clear to everybody.
Is there any other discussion on this topic? Okay. Director Thompson made a motion to approve as is, which would be Kathy ending on June 30th and David Anderson taking over as our 917 board rep on July 1st. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Director Schindley. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
No.
Nay.
All right. So we have 5 yeses and 2 nos. Motion carries. I think it was Director Kelleher and Director Carly Anderson. Next item for discussion is letter M, the student iPad lease renewal. Director Thompson?
Yes, so I pulled this one for an opportunity to provide some more context behind it so that the community knows what's going on. Not everyone may have listened to last week's working session, so I want to do a brief history. From what I understand, back in 2015, a referendum was passed, and again, for others, feel free to chime in if I have this incorrect. It was passed for $1.5 million for 10 years to be used for teaching and learning devices. And I believe this funding can only be spent for this area. There was a past decision that was made that iPads ought to be available for each student, and so that's the direction that our school went. iPads have been a vital part of our education. This enables tech literacy for our children, allows them to be creators of tech, enables personalization and online learning. Someone told me that, so and I agree. Our current agreement was $1.5 million for 11,500 devices, and we have 11,800 and some odd students. So obviously, if you do the math, someone's not getting a device. So I would like to thank Tracy Brovold. If that's your last name, I apologize. No. I'd like to thank Tracy and the tech team for researching our iPad lease options. This new lease agreement is less than 1.5 million. It's about a little less than 1.3. So we save about $200,000 to $300,000. This gives all of our students the latest iPads. And as our student population grows, we can accommodate up to 13,500 students, which is what we're projecting over the next 3 to 5 years. When we divide the number of iPads by how much we spend, that averages out to about $98.50 per device to lease per year. And lastly, as I shared earlier, it was part of a referendum that already passed, so it is in our budget, and we're able to find some additional savings because of this update. So thanks, Tracy and the team. I think this is a good financial move. I think this is a good academic move, and I think this is a good student growth move. So I make a motion to approve this request.
We have a motion by Director Thompson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Director Lind. Is there any more discussion on this item? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, so that completes our items for discussion on the consent agenda. We'll move forward with the reports that we have. A community survey results report presented by Dr. Emily McDonald and Peter Leatherman. Uh-oh. I don't think you're on.
Am I on now? There we go.
Oh.
I mean, I am loud. I was a high school teacher, so I could yell, but I'm sure the community wouldn't be able to hear me. I'm not quite that loud. Well, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Van Zyl, members of the Executive Cabinet. It's my great pleasure tonight to introduce to you Peter Leatherman. Some of you are familiar with his work from his previous reports with the Board of Education. So I have the pleasure of introducing him tonight. He is from the Morris Leatherman Group. The administration has worked with Peter earlier this year to develop a community phone survey to gain the understanding of our residents' satisfaction and needs. This is key to our strategic planning that will support us in developing our financial, programmatic, and facilities plans now and in the future. The first portion of the survey tonight will share collected information around the school district, the school board, and the administration. The second section of the survey assessed what improvements respondents might support if additional funds were available. With the district's current and projected enrollment growth and expiring operating levy later this year, and the current financial situation, survey results will give the administration and you, our school board, a shared understanding of community sentiment to inform the next steps of our finance and facilities plans, including a potential referendum in November. Community surveys are used by many school districts across the state and nation to help build trust and credibility, engage our stakeholders, inform district planning and processes, and allow for random and projectable participation, ensuring data integrity. This is an annual planning tool the district uses to provide critical information about community sentiments, district values, and long-range plans while supporting our goal of community connectedness. So with that, I will turn it over to our resident expert, Peter Leatherman, to talk about our results. Peter.
That was a very nice introduction. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back here with you this evening to go over this year's survey results and give you a snapshot on what the community's thinking. And unlike last year's was more focused on big picture items, the macro level. And we still test some of those things because as you look at potential referendums, on voting day, you want people to walk in the voting booth and make a simple cost-benefit analysis. What's being asked for, what's the benefit, and how much does it cost? And so we look at these atmospherics just to make sure that people, the district is still in good stead at the macro level with the community. To review with you what we undertook for the district, this time we did increase the sample. We spoke with 625 randomly selected residents across the school district. The interviews were conducted between January 18th and February 3rd. It was a shorter survey than last year. It wasn't as broad. It was more focused. Average interview time was 10 minutes. The non-response rate was 5%. And a 625 sample is always projectable to plus or minus 4% in 95 out of 100 cases. The margin of error is not based on the percent of the sample. It's based on the size of the sample. So that 625, it's plus or minus 4% in Lakeville or the state of Minnesota. I'll give you some demographics so you can see the profile. 53% indicated that they were cell phone only households. 9%, they still exist, are landline only households. They're my parents. And then 38% are both landline and cell phones. Continuing with the demographics. The first set of bars looks at how long has the resident lived in the school district. 40% have been here for 10 years or less, while 33% have been here for over 20 years. The typical resident, it's actually getting lower. You have more growth, as you obviously know from demographic reports. So we're at about 12 and a half years is the typical resident in the community. 15% indicate that they have a preschooler, 38% have a child attending the Lakeville School District, and then 55% are empty nesters. And once again, empty nesters does not imply an age. It's lack of presence of a child. So we could have a 33-year-old without a child. They're an empty nester for the purpose of this survey. So as we go through the results, kind of keep in mind, just over half of folks don't have any contact, any children in the district, where about 43%, 45% do. 15% indicate that they're renters. 24% indicate under $300,000 home value, while 29% indicate home values over $400,000. Median comes in over $400,000 because of the higher-end homes in the survey. That is self-assessed, so people tend to be more optimistic in their assessment of their home value than it might actually be the case.
Can I ask a question, or would you prefer to have questions wait till the end?
You know, it's 30 charts. Let's just do it as you have
Yeah,
questions.
okay.
Absolutely.
Are these the only demographic variables you have?
Nope, more coming.
Okay.
Demographic 2.
Sorry, maybe I was getting, are
Yeah.
these everything that's presented in here, are these the only demographic?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And the demographics, the purpose of demographics are twofold. First off, we want to validate the sample against updated census information to make sure we have a representative sample. But then when we do the analysis and write the report for the district, we can look at differences between households with children, empty nesters, renters versus homeowners. Those sorts of things come into play. So the demographics are twofold, primarily, though, to validate the sample.
Okay, so we don't have anything related to race or ethnic background in this demographic sample, though?
No, not for this type of survey. We're looking at referendums. We go into quality of education, those sorts of things, more broad, more specific. Oftentimes districts will have us ask those questions.
Okay.
21% are 18 to 34-year-olds, while 34% are over the age of 55. Median age comes in roughly at about 46 years old, the typical resident. The typical resident does have a college education. 51% are college graduates. That's both postgraduate, master's degrees, or bachelor's degrees. One factor that's going to come into play for every school district now is the financial situation of the household as you look for a funding request. You have 47% that are financially stressed. This has been growing over the past 3 months, and specifically the last 2 months, the first 2 months of 2023. Last year, we got to about the mid-30s, upper 30s, and then hovered as inflation increased. Since property tax statements have come out in November, and we're going to see property tax sentiment also in this survey, there has been a growth now in the financially stressed. In 2023 so far, the median for, this is the 12th school district I presented at this year, is 52%. I was at a district last night out in western Minnesota. It was 58% financially stressed. So that increase in the financially stressed, when we're looking for referendum, what it does is it increases. Every district has a certain percent of people that would support a referendum request, but they can't afford to. Okay, and that's why this financially stressed is something to flag. It's a macro level issue that's really out of control of school districts. 2% more women than men, and 74% resided in Lakeville, 11% in Burnsville, and 15% in the rest of the district. Any other questions on methodology, demographics before we go into the survey? All right. How do folks rate the overall quality of education? We look at some of the general atmospherics in the district. Last year, 87% rated it favorably. This time, 89% rated it favorably. A little bit of a downtick in the excellent rating. As we talked about in last year's results, we've seen this pretty consistently now, and it continues to go down. Folks are not going into the only fair or poor category. They're going into the soft good category, and they continue to do so. As research comes out about concern about learning loss coming out of the pandemic. And so that 21%, it's on the edge of statistical significance, the downtick, but it's still double the norm. What we're seeing right now in 2023, the norm excellent rating is 10% right now across the metro area. Couple open-endeds before we start talking with folks about specifics. What do they value? What do they like most about the school district? This one we typically fall into three categories. It's the personnel side. With your folks, that's 19%, pointing to good teachers. Then it's the programs, what's being taught in the schools. 10% indicate the variety of programs, 8% the broad curriculum. 18% fall in that category. Then if we look at the academic quality, not what's being taught, but how well it's being taught in the classroom. You have high test scores, high quality education, high graduation rates, comes in at about 18% also. Your district is kind of, and last year was the same case. All three are important, and this varies from district to district. Some districts are very driven by programs. That's what's most important. Some, it's the personnel side. Some, it's the academics, the test scores, those sorts of things. All three are equally important in your district. You do have one that's a bit of an outlier. That's high. You have very good sports teams here, with 1 in 10 indicating sports is what they like most. It's about double the norm, but you have a lot more success than other school districts. What's the most serious issue facing the school district? The good news on this chart is nothing hits 25 or 30%, where 1 in 4, 1 in 3 people are coalescing around a response. You have 3 items that hit double digits, the low double digits: lack of discipline, lack of funding, and staff shortages. In the last 2 months, we've seen in all our research a rise in the concern about lack of discipline and staff shortages. Lack of discipline has basically doubled. It was a concern about 5% last year. We're now up in the 10 to 15% range in district after district. The other one that has increased, and I'm still scratching my head about it, is the staff shortages. If we go back to the start of the school year of fall of 21, there was a lot of concern about staff shortages in Minnesota, and there were a lot of stories about not enough bus drivers and cabinet members going to teach music in first grade. And then there was a concern in fall of 2022, but it did not materialize. And so that concern, I would have thought, is mitigated. It used to be 2, maybe 3% pointing to it. It's now in this 10 to 15% range for the first few months of 2023. I don't know if more people are paying attention in the long-term discussions on staff shortages facing districts, but you're not unique on those 2 items at where they are. Lack of funding at 11%. We're going to go more in depth on the perception of funding. Then you have a variety of issues coming down in single digits.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Can you expand on lack of discipline? What do you mean by that? Or how are residents, how are they defining that?
They just tell us lack of discipline, and
Okay.
then we collapse them down into categories.
Okay, but it's so broad. So it's lack of discipline of teachers, lack of discipline of students.
Oh,
or
lack of discipline of students.
Of students. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that discipline in the past has been one of those issues that can be macro that comes to the micro. So people see news stories about what's happening in other schools, and then they bring it locally. It might not be the case here, but it is a growing concern across the metro area and across the state.
Yeah, as long as we're asking questions, I have another one in my mind. So I know all of this data is aggregated in terms of the whole sample that you collected, right? So do you ever, I guess one of the questions I have, just based on the fact that a large portion of the sample doesn't have kids, do you look at this data separately for the ones who do have kids in the district? So is the data telling us anything different
Yeah.
about?
When I go into the analysis, we'll look at the crosstabs, and we'll write up the statistically significant differences between those groups.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. What do they think of the quality education compared to 3 years ago? Last year, 42% thought it was moving in the right, it was getting better. 11% said worse. So in this one, we always look at a ratio. It's about 4 to 1. This year, we're actually up to 46 to 9, a 5 to 1 ratio. Norm on this right now is 2 to 1 in the metro area. So folks do feel like things are moving in a better direction at a higher rate than other metro area districts and across the state. Some specific perceptions. First off, do they believe this school district spends taxpayers' money effectively and efficiently? Last year, 76% agreed with that. This year, 72% agree with that statement. 4-point decrease is not statistically significant. And more importantly, the norm on this right now is 57%. So it's about 15 points higher than the norm on spending taxpayers' money effectively and efficiently. Do they feel you do what is right for the children? Absolutely. 85%. The next one is a large statistically significant increase. And this one I think we talked about last year when I was here. And this is simply you're satisfied with the decision making. Districts have had to make a lot more decisions, large decisions that impacted kids and made the news and everything like that over the course of the pandemic. There was a point during the pandemic where this was a 50-50 proposition across the metro area. Half the people agreed, half the people disagreed. You've gone up, though, in 1 year from 62% to 74%. So much more satisfaction. That's 74 to 17. It's better than a 4-to-1 ratio. Right now, the norm on that is 3-to-1. Do you do a good job of involving?
Can I just add a note? I remember when you were here the last time and we talked about that figure too, even though 62 was still higher than what some districts
at that
were.
point in time.
You also had mentioned we were in transition a lot at that time with a lot of our executive cabinet members and stuff. And so that also played into it. So now that we have everybody in place, it's evident that the community is supporting the people we have in place.
100%. And you can see half the uncertainty dropped in that.
Yep.
From 17 to 9. You're going to see
Thanks, Doug.
You're going to see a marked change in uncertainty when we get to the rating of the administration.
Yeah.
Because it really was. Last year was just right at the time of the transition.
Correct.
And everything was in flux.
Yep.
Very fair point. Does the district do a good job of involving the community? Yes, 75%. That's about 6 points higher than the norm. And then are they proud of the Lakeville schools and would recommend them? Absolutely. 87, up 1 point, almost 90%. This question was new because last year's survey was not looking at a referendum. And the question is, the schools are a good investment and I would support a property tax increase to protect that investment. This is the dipping our toes in the water of referendum. We have not told them we're talking about an operating levy, a bond referendum, a tech levy, whether it's $5 a month or $5 a year. The key on this is what is the core opposition? How many disagree in concept at the start? You only have 21% that disagree with the statement. That we always want that to be under 30% in concept. You're actually 2/3 of that at 21%. You do have 14% that are unsure. You don't have a lot of intensity on it either way. 18% strongly agree or strongly disagree with equal percents in those categories. But 1 in 5 at the onset with the discussion are core opposition. Going to the job performance ratings, like I talked about. The school board last year was 61-20. It was 3-to-1 ratio. I mentioned at that time it was very good. You've actually gone up. You can see uncertainty has been cut in half from 19 to 8. The school board now is at 76-17. Places the board in the top 5 across the state that we've surveyed over the past 18 months. The norm on this right now is 55-40. So you're markedly higher. The administration, look at that yellow bar. Last year, 41% were unsure. This time, it's down to 17%. Administration, 71-13. It's better than 5-to-1. And on this one, the norm is 2-to-1 on administration and the superintendent. So. Well, once again, I'm always concerned when I see high levels of uncertainty because nature abhors a vacuum, in a sense. And when the grapevine is there and everything, the grapevine can become poisonous. But more familiarity did not breed contempt. It actually bred, a lot of support for the school district. Overall assessment of financial management, last year, 70% rated it favorably. This year, 73% rated it favorably. Norm on this right now is 53%. So pretty consistent from year to year, almost 20 points higher than the norm. On financial credibility, the district maintains a reservoir of goodwill. Okay, you have trust out there when you're talking about financial issues. When we go back and looking, spending taxpayers' money effectively and efficiently on all the other previous questions we ask, you do have that reservoir that's necessary to ask for a potential funding request. Property taxes. All right. This is the other macro issue that is going to impact districts across the state in 2023. We have 53% indicating that their property taxes are either very high or somewhat high, 43% about average. Nobody said low, not surprisingly. What we use as a threshold here is, do we have more than a flat majority, 50% in the high category? We have 53%. So you are a hostile property tax climate. I don't have a non-tax hostile climate in 2023. Everybody, I think, when they got their assessments earlier in 2022, were very excited about the increases in their home value and didn't really think about the potential impact on what their tax bill was going to be. Opened on November 15th, and we're very surprised. And so this issue, the highest I have right now in 2023 is 64% in the very high, somewhat high category. The good news for the district is they're not blaming you. The school taxes goes down to 46% as a concern. So it's actually a statistically significant drop. So their concern, if their focus of their animus is on property taxes, it is at the city or the county or other taxing units. That's good to know, but at the end of the day, for the most part, they don't have to ask for a property tax increase to increase funding. So the overarching issues that are going to be in play in 2023 are the financial situation of the household and the property tax sentiment. Is the district adequately funded? We're back to where we were before the pandemic now, where people just don't know. 47% say yes, 44% say no, and 10% are unsure. This number is going to be fluid. Put an asterisk next to this, because what comes out of St. Paul is going to impact people's perceptions on the adequacy of funding. If people run around and talk about districts being fully funded and everything, we saw what happened in 2021 when the governor went around in 2021 and said that they gave the largest increase to funding, education funding in state history. By November of 2021, with those referendums, we had 75% in districts saying they're adequately funded, because that was the message they heard coming out of St. Paul. So this one is in flux. At right now, there really is confusion, like there typically is on this question. All right, we ask about the operating levy renewal, and renewals typically are slam dunks, okay? One failed last year for the first time in the state of Minnesota in like 12 or 15 years, a long time of renewal. Typically, renewals are somewhere between 75 and 90%. Yours is at 86% support to 13% opposition. So as a flat renewal, the district's in very good shape. What's their predisposition for a property tax increase if the district were to ask for one? You start out even. 26% are against all, 26% are for all, and 47% are persuadable. It's a great position to be in. Ideally, we want that number to be a -5 or better, which means you have 5% more core opposition than core support. You start out as a tie, and the referendums will pass or fail depending on the persuadables, not what the core opposition is. What's their willingness for a property tax increase for an operating levy? Well, 34% when we ask for a specific dollar amount indicate nothing. We always hope for that number to be under 35%, and you are by 1%, just by the skin of our teeth. But it matters. The 26% indicates $7 a month, and then if we go up the scale, or down the scale, we have the typical ski slope that we see. And so you come in with 31% at $14 a month or higher. The norm on this, then, the median tax increase, taking out those that don't support a property tax increase, is about $10 a month at the outset. Now, I'm going to say that's not set in stone. That number is elastic. There's an elasticity, or there can be a retraction on it depending on the specifics of what's being asked for. So then when we go through the specific uses of the funding for the property tax increase, attracting and retaining staff, 71% support a property tax increase for that. 67% support a property tax increase to expand CTE programs. 67% to operate the new elementary school, 67% to maintain programs, and 66% mental health, social and emotional learning. You have 2/3 or more support for all the items that we tested. What we did then is pull it all together into one operating levy question and ask them about a $539 per pupil unit operating levy increase. They were told that it would be $15 a month on a $300,000 home, or $26 a month on a $500,000 home. So it's roughly then, if we go at the $400,000 level, it's about $20 a month is what's being tested, about double of what the tolerance was. But you can see the power of having components that people support individually for the use of the funding. Support's at 62%, opposition's at 36%, uncertainties at 2%. There's really nobody feeling strongly one way or the other on this. It's only 11-6, 2-1 in favor of strong support. It is important to note, though, I'm going to go back 2 slides. We had 34% indicate nothing. When we told them what the funding was going to be used for, it only went to 36%. So the uses of the funding are matching up for even folks that are supporting a lesser amount, seeing the value in the uses of the funding to go to that dollar amount. Now, what's the reason for the levy decision? At this point in time, it's the soft reason. Education's important. As you go through and develop a plan, the discussion will have to be about need. That's what drives people to the polls in November, makes them come out. At this point in time, 9% are focused on a need portion of this, with mental health, CTE programs retaining teachers, or 2% just saying it's needed as a whole. 9% indicate the cost is reasonable. If we go down to the bottom, on the red bars, the reasons for opposition, that goes back to the property tax sentiment in the community, where 13% are saying their taxes are already too high, 13% are non-stakeholders, 6% say the cost is too high, 5% poor spending, and only 1% indicate that this is not needed. So the district definitely would have an opportunity on a potential operating levy. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend going up to the full amount as we tested, simply because of the macro issues of the financial situation, property taxes and everything, but there definitely is a pathway, an opportunity to not only have the renewal passport, a funding request for additional operating levy funds.
Can I ask you on these options here, were these things that the people that you were surveying answered with, or did you give them options to select?
Working with the school district, we came up with the options to
Okay,
test.
so do you ever include in that one, just out of curiosity, they might not have kids in the district, but it does help maintain home values with a solid education system? So,
that would be in the atmospheric. Sometimes we'll ask that.
Okay.
People pretty much see that. We'll ask that, do you agree that high-quality public schools impact your property
Okay.
values? The norm across the metro area is about 80-85%.
Okay.
So that's pretty consistent. That's why we don't even bother
Okay.
to ask it anymore.
All right, thank
I was
you.
going to say that everybody's a stakeholder in this district. I mean, just from
Yeah, whether you have kids or not, so
Yeah.
that's why I was,
Yeah.
okay, yep, thank you.
All right, let's turn to a shift on the bond referendum. First off, we retested some items that we tested last year. Thinking about housing construction, we asked, do they believe that housing construction has increased in the past 5 years? Last year, 65% said yes. This year, 73% said yes. So it is a statistically significant increase. What about the expectation for the coming 5 years? That actually went up 10%, from 59% to 69%, indicating that they believe that housing construction would continue to increase. So they understand, they believe the history is there for the growth, and they expect the housing growth to continue. Now, what about the impact on student enrollment? Last year, we didn't have as many folks necessarily seeing the correlation between housing growth and student enrollment. We only had 53% that said yes, they thought student enrollment would be increasing. This time, though, it goes to 67% with an expectation that student enrollment will be increasing. The no went down 9 points. So now you have an expectation in the community, the perception out there that the housing growth will continue and that it is going to impact student enrollment in the Lakeville area schools. Where there's confusion or there needs clarification in the community is, does the district have enough space to accommodate that growth? Okay, and last year, 37% indicated you had enough space. This year, you actually have 46% indicating you have enough space. Part of this, I can't help but think, is the discussion of the new elementary school that's not open. Okay, that's kind of out there. You have a new building coming on, so that should help with growth. You have to start setting the story about, okay, you have an elementary school, kids will go to middle school from there and to high school from there. So you don't have to bring them along and teach them about the growth and the impact on enrollment. You have to tell them about the impact on the buildings and the facilities that you currently have. So would they support a property tax increase for a bond referendum? On this one, this goes back to the perception of need then. And now we have 41% indicating no. Nothing, and that's about 6 points higher than we wanted at the outset. We have 20% that say over $24 or more a month, 26% at $12 a month. So the median comes in roughly at about $16 a month at the outset amongst those supporting. But you do have a very high 41% saying nothing. We broke out the middle school space in the survey and asked what would they think should be done for middle schools. And we said I would support a property tax increase to build a new middle school. 26% supported that. I would support a property tax increase to build additions to existing middle schools. 20% supported that. But we had 41% that indicated they would not support a property tax increase to provide additional space at middle schools. Part of that is the perception that it's not needed. Okay, so on this one, on the middle school space, it's not ripe in the community as a need at this point in time. We went through then some other options for a property tax increase. You only have two options that have a majority support right now. Additional high school classrooms at 5735 and a high school vocational center at 5441. Everything else has more opposition than support at this point in time, from the new early child facility, the new ALC, a new elementary school, new warehouse facility, new district and community education office. Where we're going in 2023 as districts look for bond referendums, and it's pretty consistent now with every district that I've surveyed on. It's going back to 2008, 2009, 2010 with the recession. Folks are going to support have-to-haves. They're not going to support nice-to-haves at this point in time. And this list kind of clearly states that at this point in time, tied with the lack of perception of need. So we told them that the cost for everything that we've discussed was about $371 million, just to see if there was sticker shock, every district. And it really doesn't matter if I'm testing a plan of $20 million or a plan of, I think the highest I've done this year is $495 million. Pretty much people split, okay? You listen to the components, and you make this, and you never have a majority saying, hey, that sounds great, and it doesn't matter if it's 20 million or 495 million. It's just split, because in the minds of folks, that 371 million, it's an ethereal number, okay? What does it mean for them? That's the key. And so we went back and told them the 371 million. On a $300,000 home, it was $26 a month. On a $500,000 home, it was $44 a month. So the average then on a $400,000 home is about $35 a month. And so that was well over the tax tolerance. And there you see the impact that there's not high support levels for what's being asked for the property tax increase. And so we actually have a split 46% support, 51% opposed, and 3% are unsure. What's the reason for the bond, the decision on the bond? The typical one at the top, education's important. On this one, though, that need question, that threshold, we only have 4% indicating it's needed. At the bottom, we have 6% indicating it's not needed. So it weighs at this point in time in favor of not needed. But then we have the tax issue leading the opposition, that concern on taxes. We did ask a question on a proposed approach for facilities needs. We told folks some of the district's facilities needs are immediate and some are over the next 10 years. Some people think just the district should ask for all of its needs at once and not have to ask residents again for the next 10 years, while others think the district should ask for most immediate needs and come back in a few years with the next set of facilities needs. Not surprised with the economy we're in. You have 26% saying ask for it now, 48% as needed, and 26% are unsure. So this really is ask as you need. Not do, what districts were doing in 2015 and 2017, saying we're going to set up facilities for the next 20 years. There's not going to be the appetite right now in 2023 for that sort of long term. When folks are worried about next month's mortgage payment, they're not going to be so concerned on the district facilities and what they're going to be in 2033.
Can I ask a question? Do we know anything about, and I'm assuming this would change depending on the climate, but do we know anything about, you ask for it this year and then you ask for it again in 3 years. Is there any change in perception despite this kind of thing that people are saying as needed, but that they're like, well, you just asked me 3 years ago for?
You will always, I've worked with this district back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. God, I've been doing this
every other year.
And it was every year. Mm-hmm. It was the plan. And it was like we would write the Golden Book story on the bond referendum plan for the next 5 years. We're going to build 2 elementary schools this year, and then we're going to build a middle school, and then we're going to go back and build. You lay out the story and tell them, so you have that expectation. I think that always works, especially when you have to pull back and not do everything, is to set the expectation that more needs to be done. We're only going to ask for immediate needs now.
Yeah.
Is an important part of it. You will always have people say, you're always asking.
Right.
And keep in mind that if we ask folks, do you know the difference between an operating levy and a bond referendum? In the 90s, we used to ask the question, but it was like the universal concept of pie. 20% said they knew, 80% had no idea. They just view it as all one funding source. So you could go for one bond referendum every 10 years, but if you go for an operating levy every 5 years, people think, well, you just asked me for a bond. You realize that's going to be out there, but it's important to tell the whole story and the plan and set that expectation for the future.
Thank you.
So, last question then. What are folks, if everything went to the ballot in November, 83% indicate they would support the operating levy renewal, 58% would support the operating levy increase, and 46% would support the bond. Recommendation coming out of the survey would be for the district to definitely do the operating levy renewal. Look at the operating levy increase, perhaps pulling back that dollar amount, prioritizing within. Obviously, the new funding for the elementary school is going to be critical in order to open it, and that sort of thing. Not that there is elasticity in that number, but I'm getting old, getting more conservative on this, and just things might not be better financially in November, and just be cognizant of that. The superintendent asked me long ago, when's the best time to do a survey? And I said, well, the Monday before the Tuesday of a referendum. Unfortunately, you have to do a lot of planning and everything because a survey is a snapshot in time. Okay, this is the current climate right now. And so I really do think, though, the bond referendum I would classify as not ripe at this point in time. And part of that is being driven by your opening a new elementary school. Folks still have the expectation that growth is happening, enrollment will be increasing, but they don't necessarily see that impacting the Lakeville area schools' ability to accommodate that student growth. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Well, it is good survey information. It really is. It's absolutely beneficial, and it's very positive message for this district. But there is a lot that has to get done and decided on. And the other thing to remember is that the levies have to be done in November. The bonds can be, there's 6 or 7 times throughout the year that they can be done.
Do we have information on, who comes to that when we're on an off election kind of year? Like who comes to vote? And how does that compare to this kind of sample?
I mean, in even your election, you'll have down here, I would guess you're plus or minus 5% on 75% turnout. Obviously, very large. 2024, it'll be monstrous. In off-year elections, typically between 25 and 35% is the typical. The problem with off-year elections is your most likely supporter is your least likely voter. In the last 10 years, households with children, parents, do not turn out at the levels that they used to in the past. We saw it start in 2013, and so the profile, it takes a lot of work and a strong vote yes campaign by volunteers in the community in order to get parents to vote. Time and time again, they've shown that if the kids have hockey that night, they're going to take them to hockey instead of go vote. And so it's much harder to get that group to vote than it is in a general election.
Yeah, it's interesting to me just because you look at kind of who participated in this, and a lot of people don't have kids in the district, and so you can see how that might change the data. I'm interested to see when those groups are broken up what that looks like, but also how representative is this sample for who's going to turn out, and how do we target the people we need to turn out, and like you're saying. Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I would say the other thing I think it's important to point out is that obviously what has worked in this district is to tell the story. The story has been told even prior to my arrival about the growth. You can see how that impacted what people understand. I think the building of the new elementary school was a positive, but it also impacts the story of the space. So people listen, and so that's kudos, I think, to the communications team and the information that they roll out. But it's also vitally important, I think, to make whatever steps we do understandable for people. And then it's a repeated message over and over again so that they understand the need and the reasons behind why it's there. You just can't throw generics out there and think that it's going to stick on the wall. You have to be pretty specific, as even like when he asked some of the specifics of would you support this, would you support this, it changed because people then had a feeling about this is a specific reason. That makes sense to me. When it's just general, they're like, yeah, I'm going to lean towards no a little more easily.
Right.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you so much for your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next report for this evening is the Teacher Retirement Incentive Report. That's going to be presented by Dr. Van Zyl and Brenda Albrecht.
So you have in front of you the possibility of a early retirement incentive. This kind of was a little similar to what I talked about earlier, and Brenda doesn't have to come up, but she can if she wants. Again, this is one of those items that we feel like it could have some impact on us in regards to our financial situation. We have normally 20-ish people that retire, but with the early notification incentive, that is a positive for us, but $8,000 would get roughly about 6 months worth of insurance, which may be a reason for some of our staff that may be thinking and contemplating about retirement but are needing a little extra, the ability to be able to do that. One of the things as you read through that, we do have, as I said earlier, a floor that says we have to have at least 25 people that would sign up for this retirement incentive in order for it to actually pay out. If we get less than that, it really just doesn't give us the savings that we would need in order to do that. So again, this is for you to approve. We would still have to take it to our association for them to get approval. So just by saying, hey, yeah, we're willing to do this, it doesn't necessarily guarantee it. We would have to come back and tell you what our conversation was in regard to the association and hopefully get their support, because we're really trying to look at ways to generate some dollars that hopefully would then save us on the reduction side of things. The challenge with this, just being as upfront as we can, the dollars that we spend as the incentive basically come out of your general fund. And so we have to be very mindful of not overspending that general fund because we're already going to be pretty low in that. And the savings we don't really reap until next year's budget, because if you have a person who's making $90,000 as a teacher retire, we have to be able to replace them with somebody more than likely, and we can't replace them with somebody who makes $90,000. We'd have to replace them with somebody who makes less than that in order to see a savings. That's also why at some point there'll probably be a conversation and a recommendation that we have a cap on where we allow people to come in, something you've had in this district in the past, and that's what generates some additional savings for us. So if somebody leaves at 90 and we put a cap on somebody making, that we can only bring them in if they make 55,000 or less, there you get some substantial savings, what then helps us with the financial situation that we've been discussing. So is that any questions that you have, we'll do our best to answer, but that's the reason behind it, is hopefully incentivize a few more people to help generate some additional savings. And again,
Is there
we
a
have that
cap on
floor.
Is there a cap on the?
25.
No, that's the minimum, but is there?
That's the minimum. It could be as many as we get. If for some reason all of a sudden we had 100 people, Bill would probably have a heart attack because that would generate, some real heavy pressure on us on the general fund. But I right now, if I remember correctly, Bill, nod your head, or Brenda, I think we've got 115 people that would be eligible to retire. And so the likelihood that you'd have 115 retire is not high, because many of them need, still have kids in school, want the insurance, those types of things. So it just is a tipping point for some of our folks. Maybe we get an additional 5, 10, 15 people that maybe say, hey, that's enough to help tip it over. If it does, great. If not, that's part of the reason that we have that floor at 25. We get roughly 20 a year anyhow, so there really won't be any real incentive savings for us on that side, because we have to pay out their severance regardless of what we do. So that's kind of the reasoning behind it.
Director Thompson?
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic idea to be able to help from a long-term point of view in financial savings. So just to make sure that I understand this, there would be an $8,000 incentive for teachers who want to retire earlier, and the notice has to be provided early March or something of that nature. I think the concern or the unknown that I have is because, again, I'm not in the education space. We have individuals that accrue it's sick days or severance or whatever that might be. And so I don't know how much a person can accrue or how much a person normally has in sick days, so that if they choose to retire, I just could a person potentially have up to 100% of what they made that year as a salary in severance and sick pay? So let me rephrase the question. What is the average severance and sick pay payout?
Sure, and I'm going to look at Bill a little bit, but from looking at the numbers, I want to say on average it's probably about $20,000. You have some folks that probably push 30, but on average it's probably $20,000, and that's already a component that's built into the budget. As Bill builds the budget, last year he knew on average how many people roughly retired, and you have to pay the severance out, so that is in the budget for that as well.
And so, on average, how many teachers do we normally have retired?
About 20.
About 20. Okay.
The last several years, it's been about 20.
Okay. So bear with me. I've got a calculator in front of me, so I'm just curiously crunching some numbers. And so, on average, of the 20,000 teachers that retire, we would pay out roughly about $400,000 in severance and sick pay, on average. Okay.
Yes.
So that's going to happen ideally, no matter what. If they retire, if on average we get about 20. I guess my question would be then, why would we, if we average 20, what is the reason or the purpose of the 8,000 incentive again?
Sure. The incentive would be to get more than that. That's why you put 25 as the floor. You have to get at least 25.
Got it.
Because if we don't get 25, then you don't pay out that additional 8,000. They still get their severance that they would normally get. So it's hopefully an incentive to get 5, 10, 12, 15 more people to say, hey, that's worth it to me to be able to do that. Because we do have some folks that are kind of sitting on the fence.
Yeah.
And so if this helps push them that way, it can be some savings to us as we move forward.
So then if, let's say we get 40, we happen to double it instead from 20, that is an additional $400,000 that we may not have tentatively planned for, assuming if we have an average of 20 teachers that retire. So knowing that we've got a $7 million deficit coming into this year, we can't control how many people choose to retire. But if we're giving them an incentive to retire, now we are putting us potentially in a position where we may have to pay out more so in severance than historically that we might have done in the past. Would that be a fair statement?
Potential for it, but in talking to the association, they don't know that it would be a dollar amount would necessarily be a huge tipping point. In a brief conversation, you're talking single digits, maybe a little double digit of people that would take advantage of that. And so the dollar amount that they have suggested to us is substantially greater than this. And for that very reason that you just pointed to is a reason that we have to be able to be financially responsible with it. Right. And so we wouldn't be able to afford it if they would, instead of 8,000, got 20,000. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because then we're paying the 20,000 plus another 20,000, and it just won't be financially wise. And so we tried to look at a dollar amount, and I want to say it was a few years ago, you had an incentive that was $6,000. And so we took a look at a 2% increase over when that was done over time, and it came up to about 7,500. We rounded it up to 8,000 if you did a 2% increase from what that incentive was offered. And then Bill and I looked at the numbers and said 8,000's about as high as we can go. And still know that it's not probably going to kick 50 people into it. It's probably going to kick at least 20, has to be at least 25. Otherwise, again, there's no savings. We're hoping for 30, 32, 33, 40, maybe if we were to get there. Not that I want great people to leave, but we have to financially know that can be an incentive for us as well.
So my last comment, 2 points. One, I feel like this is a great mechanism for when we don't have a budget issue. And because we're putting ourselves in a position where we are potentially absorbing more than $400,000 that we historically have paid out. Now, I'm not a teacher expert or anything like that, but maybe as a suggestion, maybe we give them more money to stay and retire next year when we actually have funding potentially to pay out. Just saying, I don't know. And the second thing is that while there seems to be no mechanisms in place or a guarantee or maybe an amendment that might be needed to say that if we're paying $8,000 and the average severance is $20,000, that's a $30,000 delta. So then when we hire a new person, if an average teacher makes $90,000, we'd want to make sure the break even would be $60,000. So I don't know. I'm not the HR person, but do we have mechanisms in place to ensure that we're going to be less than what we paid out and that delta? You know what I mean?
I just want to say the average teacher does not make $90,000.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just running. Sorry.
The people farthest over on our salary schedule do make $90,000.
Yeah.
The people on the far bottom left or right and down do make that. Not the average teacher, as Kim was saying, but the people that would be closer to this incentive are those folks that make that. So in order, I think, to answer your question is that there hasn't been a restriction in the last, I don't know how many years it said, if we're bringing in a new person to replace somebody else, we've been giving them full credit and they could come in with almost as far over and down as the person that we hired if they had the years experience, the degrees, those types of things. We're actually looking at what would be that location that we say this is the max that we're going to allow you to bring in. It's probably in the master's column. It's probably with 10 years of experience, 5, 6 years. We're figuring that dollar amount out, but that will be part of the conversation when we get to the budget adjustments for next year and how do we come up with that $7 million. So yes, that has to be a component in order for us to get some additional monies from this. We can't just say, hey, hire whoever you want.
Right.
The only caveat to that would be there are some very specific high needs areas like math teachers, special ed teachers, science teachers, that you have to have some flexibility to be able to bring some of them in because there's not 20 of those staff members lined up applying to our district. In years past, there probably was, but now you're talking about a very limited number. So we have to have some flexibility to be able to say in maybe some of those high needs areas, we maybe have the flexibility to go beyond what that cap would be for those specific areas. But that'd be part of the conversation that we have with you down the road.
Can I ask a clarifying question? When do they have to, sorry, I think I missed the specifics on this one. When do they have to notify by?
The early notification for the 500 is March 15th, but we're talking about, I don't know that to have a date in front of me,
June,
Brenda. What's the
July?
date?
June 3rd.
Yeah.
I think it's
Normally it's
June-
March, well, technically they can, when they want to retire, but with this, in order to get the $8, it's March. I think we're shooting for the 14th or 15th. It was a pretty quick turnaround because we wanted to be able to know if this was going to be successful in order to incentivize some people. And if it's not, we also want to tell those people, if only 22 people sign up, we want to tell those 22 people, hey, you only had 22 people sign up. You're not going to get that 8,000. And then that's also part of our budget adjustment because then we'd be able to back out that spend to be able to explain where that went.
Yeah, so in here it says, I'm not sure if this is correct, but it says one-time benefit will automatically expire on June 30th.
That's because it's an MOU, so that means that it only is for this year. So that if the association agrees to it, they know that it's only a one-time offer.
Okay. Yeah,
So
I
it
just,
expires at the end of this contract year.
okay. I'm just thinking about like, for hiring, for replacing, so we want to keep it with the same March timeline so that we get qualified people
Correct.
applying.
It'd be
for
very,
these
it's very
back-
close to that March 8th window. I want to say it's either the 14th or 15th that we put in there. Oh,
Okay.
okay, we got it the same date.
Thank
So,
you.
There we go. So it's even quicker turnaround
Yeah,
than what
just,
I thought.
I just was trying to be mindful of.
Yep,
you
no,
know,
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 30th is, so the associations understand and agrees to knowing that it's not a repeated
Right.
year after year guarantee. It's, hey, this is a 1-year offer, and then you can do it again, to Brian's point, if we need to generate some dollars. The challenge is, we're below your board policy of percentage of fund balance, so we've got to build that back up. So you have to be mindful of that as we move forward, too.
Well, and I can see where this wouldn't necessarily be our chosen option if we weren't in a budget crisis, because we want those good teachers in those positions.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. You don't want to lose your great teachers because we don't have just an overabundance of people just jumping into education, but you also want to provide whatever options. We have to provide whatever options we can to try to fill this gap.
And I think we also have the benefit of people wanting to be teaching here, so we run a little less risk when it comes to that compared to most districts around us.
Yeah, just based off of even the survey results. So when
Yep.
your community talks well and supports you, teachers want to be a part of a community that feels that way. They don't necessarily want to be part of a community that's down in the dumps.
Yep.
Thank
Any
you
other
for all
comments
that-
or questions?
Say thank you for all that extra information.
Sure.
Director Thompson?
So I just want to just logically think this out. We're incentivizing teachers to retire early, which is a good long-term plan. But incentivizing teachers also puts us in a position where we'd have to pay out severance as well as a bonus incentive, and then potentially hire a teacher who hopefully is lower than the person that is leaving in a time that we're in a $7 million budget deficit. And so it's almost to the point where wouldn't we want to try to retain the teachers? And I guess I don't understand why we would want to go down this path. So I'm looking for more clarity around.
Sure.
Is it just more for yearly savings in year 2, 3, 4, and 5, and less about what we're trying to do for the budget deficit for this year?
It is not necessarily going to save you money this year.
Okay. Yep.
It's what you save in the coming years that help build that process. The other component is, just to make sure you understand, severance gets paid out regardless.
I get it. Yep.
So if 20 people this year, even without the incentive, said that, hey, we're retiring, they get their severance pay regardless of any of this. This is hopefully an incentive to attract a few more, so that we're able to then have hopefully some additional savings into the budget that we present to you for next year. So it's similar to what I think was just said, is that Lakeville is in one of those areas where we have the ability to attract people And I think that speaks highly of the district, and people want to be here. Because not only do we pay pretty well, but if you take a look at our benefits plan, we have some pretty rich benefits that other districts don't have that is attractive to staff as well. So all of those things, I think, I think I heard over here, and I think maybe it was Judy who said it, we have teaching staff that want to come to Lakeville, and I think if we can show that we're able to fill this void of the $7 million we're talking about, and we have a plan to move forward, that's not going to scare people away, because I think, as you've seen from the survey, our community thinks well of the district. We've got good kids. We got programs that do well. And so I think staff want to be here. So we're in a little bit better position than some other districts in order to attract those people to come to us. So I can't tell you that there isn't a little bit of risk. I understand what you're saying, but we're having to pay that we're having to pay that severance out regardless.
Yep.
And in order to, that's why we put the 25 in there. So we're just not paying for what we would normally get. We're trying to get a little bit more. And so that hopefully it generates some more savings for us down the road.
Yep.
And Director Thompson, as an educator, I just want to speak, I get your concern also with replacing tenured staff with newer teachers, but there's a lot of positives with hiring someone that's a young teacher fresh out of college, all their ideas. And as a district, we have a wonderful mentor program where they come alongside some of our seasoned staff, learn how to do things, and have that support along the way. So I don't see that as a negative.
That's very helpful perspective too. Thank you.
Director Thompson.
So I think my last comment would be just, again, this is a this would be potentially a $200,000 expense. So we are for a long-term planning financial decision versus a deficit decision. So we haven't had the opportunity to see all the other what the menu list of financial actions we need to take to get to that $7 million deficit. What I don't want to happen is that we've got to cut, 4, teachers in third grade or middle school or XYZ because the budget's not there for whatever reason to offset the $200,000 of potential expense for this incentive program. And so without seeing that bigger picture, I don't know if it makes sense for year one if the intent is for us to try to find a balanced budget. So
Yeah, I understand that, but I would also say it's not guaranteed, because even if you approve it, the association still has to agree to it and say
Agreed.
that's an incentive. So I think if we don't at least try to move it forward, and they can either say, hey, we agree with you, let's do the 8,000. I think that's a more positive risk if the association feels like there's some folks that will jump on board. If they say, hey, it's not going to do you any good, and they turn it down, we're no worse off than we are right now. I think the risk of it generating hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional spending for us is pretty minimal, just based off of the conversation we had.
okay.
And I'd just like to add, this is a practice that not just us, but other school districts and other businesses do. And the parameters and the plan that's laid out here is very well thought out and detailed. And it still has some flexibility for us to do what we need to do depending on the feedback that we get from our teachers. So I appreciate the work that you guys have done on this and the time you've taken to explain it in detail. So thank you.
Thank you for that information.
But and I just want one last comment again. I apologize. I agree with Director Keller. This is a good suggestion. I think this is a good practice, and I'm generally I am on board with the practice. The only thing that I have concerns on is the timing of the practice. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to the recommended actions, and I'll invite Bill Holmgren to come forward, talk about the approval of the revised budget for fiscal year 23.
Madam Chair, members of the school board, Superintendent Van Zyl. Yes, tonight, I need to find my
Is your microphone on?
I think so.
test.
There we go. Okay.
Not very loud. There we go.
Yeah, move you up a little bit there.
There we go. Okay. it's coming up as a PDF, so it's not going to look as good as, let me look here one more time. Trying to show everybody how tech savvy you are. This is the wrong one. Well, we'll have to
We don't need
use-
pretty, it's
Do you
okay.
bring it up or do they bring it up? Do you have to bring it up? They bring it up.
Oh, well, it's on here, but as a PDF, so that doesn't. Oh,
You can just scroll through that.
I know what we can do. I can use my computer. I got mine up. Okay. Oh, that'll work?
That'll work.
Okay, sorry for the delay.
That's all right.
Okay, as we spoke last week about the revised budget, tonight I bring it to you for approval. So I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about the changes that we put in place and try to mitigate some of the issues that we had with our budget. I want to just go back over some of the bigger inflation factors and how we're in the position that we are. So I want to touch here again. During the pandemic, if you look at that in 21, you'll see that we really lost some enrollment that year. And this is something we certainly didn't anticipate. We didn't know what was going to happen. And what's happened since is we really haven't, those kids that went did not come back. We're seeing the same growth since that point in time, especially in our elementary schools. But that's about a $2.5 million decrease in our revenue that we didn't anticipate. So that's part of our revenue problem, or change, I should say, more than a problem. But I mean, we know it's there now, but it is about a $2.5 million piece that is gone from this day forward every single year. If you remember back in June, not everybody was here in June, at least on the board, but the budget that was brought forward back in June did have us spending down the fund balance by $4.5 million. So that piece was already there. And as if you remember, when we talked about some of the inflation factors that we had to deal with last year that really kind of took us off guard a little bit, was some big changes in our transportation. If you remember what's happened to fuel prices, they exploded during the end of last year, and now, of course, we're taking care of it this year. So we had to build another $1 million into our budget for this year that we did not have in June. Same thing with our substitute costs. We're seeing a lot more need for having subs come in, and we're spending $1.5 million more than we have in the past. This is something we didn't see till after the pandemic, but now it's here and it's still going on this year. I haven't saw any change or decrease from last year in how many subs that we're bringing in. So that's about a $1.5 million increase that we built back into this revised budget. Then utility costs was another area where we really saw some big increases. If you remember, our pool came online too at this time, and the CMS pool is costing us a lot of money in utilities, more than we anticipated. So it's about $700,000 there that we built into this revised budget in utilities. And the special ed gave us a little bit of a uptick, about $800,000. So this is something else that we built in to make sure that at least it's in the budget, even though we know that it's gonna, we're in a deficit spending situation, but these are situations where we can't cut them, at least not right now. Once we put contracts in place, they're in place for the whole year, and we can't make those changes until we get to the end of June. So then, to mitigate, we found some areas where we at least make some changes immediately this year to try to make some, to help this budget. So we looked at our maintenance areas. As you know, we have LTFM funds. We saw some areas where we could take some labor costs and move into LTFM. So we did that. So that's $700,000 savings actually to the general fund. There'll be an LTFM at least for a while. Staff development, another area where we saw some staffing that were eligible to use staff development funds for. So $500,000 we have some employees that we shifted into staff development. And then, as you know, we went around to our buildings departments and made a 10% cut. Worked with all our principals and our department leaders, administrators, and so forth. And we did get about $300,000 savings from that. So that's where we're at, that $7 million now. So if you put the ads in and then take the subtractions off, we went from $4.5 to $7 million. So looking at last year, we're looking at revenues now from 22 to 23. Revenues, we up about $200,000 in local other. That's anything that we collect from our community or interest that we receive and so forth. State sources, of course, is our formula allowance that we get from the state of Minnesota. We're up about $7.1 million there. It's based primarily on the 2% increase that we received from the legislature this year, plus our increase in enrollment, which is running a little over 2%. So that came up to $7.1 million from the year before. Property taxes. Here we're not seeing a large increase, but we do have another $4.9 million. But I just want to, as a caveat, just let you know that half of this money is for LTFM. It's not money that we can use for staffing in any way. And then federal sources, as we're using up the COVID dollars, they're all federal dollars. That's slowly coming off. So you see we're down $1 million from the year before. We're having just a few dollars we're using in this year, and then they're going to tail off too. So we'll talk about that for next year later. But we do have $11 million in new revenue for the year that we're in right now. When we look at the expenditure side, you see administration, we have the same administrators we have. That there was a small increase to some of the salaries, but rounding doesn't really show up any change here, so it's a zero. Our direct support service is up a couple $100,000. Of course, our elementary and secondary education, that's the big core piece of what we do here in Lakeville and educating our students. That's a $2.7 million increase for the staff that are in the education area. Vocational, we have the same teachers there. Special education, again, they grow just like the regular education does. Instructional support, let's see. One thing I want to say here is we're showing a $5.6 million increase. But remember, we talked earlier this evening about the new lease for the devices for our students, new iPads. Okay. The rules that we have from GASB is I have to expense all that money when we get that, when we get the devices. So, and that total levy over the period, the 4-year period, is $5.1 million. So you're seeing that whole $5 million in the budget this year. It comes off for next year. It looks a little goofy when you see that there, that big increase, but it's a one-time increase, and it'll go back down. Okay, people support, $800,000 in our site and buildings. We have some little inflation in the supplies that we need, but not too bad. So again, we have 11. Oh, go ahead.
Can you re-explain the instructional support again, the 5.6? I wasn't tracking that. What I heard was that because the levy passed, the $5 million shows up all at once. Or I'm sorry, but go ahead. There's a $5.6 million increase. So
it's an accounting for the actual lease for the devices.
okay. So what is the overall purchase price for that lease of the
$5.1 million.
Okay, and because we're paying that all now at once, that's why it went up.
It's a book entry. I'm not spending that dollars, but we have to show the expenditure in the budget. So it looks a little confusing, but that's why you're seeing that huge increase in this area.
So, but there really isn't an increase then, is what I'm hearing.
No, we're increasing our liabilities.
Yes.
We will pay
thank you.
in the future. Okay, let's look at our fund balances then. You can see non-spendable, of course. These are dollars that we have something that's prepaid at the end of the year. It runs around $100,000 a year. If we buy something that we're going to use in the next year, it sits in this asset area. Restricted funds, we are using spending down those restricted funds a little bit as we're trying to find ways to help money in our general fund. So you see that shrinking a little bit. But we do see, you see us dropping just a little under $6 million in the unassigned category. And this is the area, we can't go any lower. That's why we're looking for the adjustments that we need for next year. But for the end of this year, we're looking at a $1.5 million fund balance to be here at the end of the year. So with that said, is there any questions on that? I'm asking for approval tonight to move this revised budget into our system and go ahead and use it.
I would just like to make a comment just for some clarity. This is a question that we get quite frequently about special education funding. That is a issue that all districts are dealing with, not only in this state, but across our nation. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the federal government has not provided their 40% funding for special education, so it's constantly been in a deficit, which has to come out of districts' general funds. There's also a maintenance of effort that goes into special education, meaning we have to maintain our spending from the year before to show that we're still maintaining that effort and educating the students that we have. So I don't want people to think that, oh, we should be cutting some of that special ed dollars. There's a lot of different laws involved with that, and there's different funding pots that money comes from, and that's just been something that's been a historical issue.
And we did have an extensive discussion around this with our last study session, going through this in a lot more detail. So I think, I mean, I'm trying to think, it seems like you've done a little bit of tweaking and changing since then, but everything else.
I actually used the exact same slides I used last Tuesday night.
Okay.
I didn't continue with the new year.
Yeah.
We'll deal with the new year.
Yeah,
in
correct.
future
Right.
meetings.
Correct.
Right.
Yep, that's right.
Right.
So thank you.
Okay,
So do I
guess
have a- sorry, go
one
ahead.
thing I would like to say maybe for the public is we do have this full budget on our website.
Yep.
Just look at our business services and our finance area. And our budgets are there, past budgets, our annual reports, everything's there if someone wants to look in more detail.
Yep, so, let's see, you need a motion, so I'll make a motion to approve the revised budget.
I'll second it.
So I have a motion by Director Kelleher and a second by Director Lynn to approve the budget. Is there any more discussion on this item?
I do just one comment. I just want to thank you for keeping our schools afloat. There was probably a lot of reallocation and moving around and being very creative with what we have available. And it's probably not very easy managing a $200 million budget, but thank you for keeping us favorable in with $211,000. Thanks. So,
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All in favor?
aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Holmgren.
Thank you.
As we have no additions to the agenda tonight, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
I'll be very quick in this, and again, I want to thank, similar to what Brian was saying, I think Bill, but also our whole administrative team and our staff. Trying to go through this is never an easy process when it's related to budget and adjustments, and I think our folks have tried to roll up their sleeves and address what we could to come up with $1.5 million this year. But then also as we're starting to work through the other process to deal with the other $7 million that we'll have to deal with. And just up front, $7 million is going to hurt. There's no way, shape, or way around that. Just being up front. But very quickly, just a couple of items. Just wanted to remind you, we are reaching the end of our snow days. We actually will be meeting to recalculate how much time we have. And so I know folks are wondering about that. I would also say this. I know that there's, having done this long enough, there's not going to be a way to please everybody when it comes to snow days. So I know sometimes you hear it, I hear it, and I try to respond to people and let them know that if I could be a weatherman and be wrong 90% of the time, I'd gladly do that and still maintain my job. But so, we do have to make decisions starting at about 4:30 in the morning. Because it takes us a while to roll everything out. I know you're aware of that, but maybe the general public doesn't understand that our bus companies, myself, Bill, our maintenance staff, other folks are trying to hit the ground running at 4:30 because we have to make decisions. So weather does change, like the other day when it was 33 degrees and it was just raining, and then the time the buses started rolling, it was 31 degrees and things got a little bit icy. Nobody saw that coming. So, we do try to deal with that. But we will update folks. We are getting close to our maximum number of days. And so if something happens, we'll make you aware. We may have to bring some calendar adjustments to you, and Dr. McDonald and her team will do that. The other thing I would point out is don't forget, if you have the opportunity to have conversations with folks in the legislature, please continue to have those conversations. They need to hear from you in our community. Not that they don't necessarily want to hear from me, but they know what I'm going to say, right? They need to hear from you and from their constituents in regard to how do they support special education? How do they support public education as a whole? How do they make sure that some of the things that they're writing about and are being proposed could impact us? Here's just an example that I will use. I'm not against having kids getting free and reduced lunch. Don't get me wrong. But I don't know that if they really understand the ramifications to paying for everybody's lunch because we get allocated dollars in other areas that would actually cost us about $750,000 if they go through this process, that they have to figure out how to fill those gaps for us. So we just hope that they listen when they ask these, and hopefully they ask, because not everybody who's sitting down there has been in education and knows what the budget looks like, but just continue to be advocates for public education and the funding that's there. And then finally, we do have our 2 task force meeting tomorrow night as a combined task force. They're actually, Peter's going to come and present that information and so that they can see that in regard to facilities and finances and move them forward as well. So questions that you have for me?
The only other thing I'd add about the snow days and ice and rain is our 86 square mile school district varies a lot from the north to the south.
Yeah,
Dirt
and paved roads to
paved
gravel roads.
and there's everything. So just because you look out your window and it looks great, it doesn't somewhere else in this district.
Is there a time when we'll hear from the task forces? Is that coming up?
Bill and I are meeting with them again tomorrow, and part of the conversation that we'll have after that is what kind of feedback that we get from them. Because basically what we'll do is we'll probably give you a synopsis of what we did and where we have been with them. Really, they're giving us feedback and input. They're not necessarily making recommendations. That's not necessarily the purpose of the task force, but we'll use the information that they've given us to help guide us in relation to the facilities components and to the finance components as well. So there won't necessarily be a person from the task force. It'll probably be Bill and I giving you kind of a rundown of where we're at.
Any further questions? All right, do I have a motion for adjournment?
I will motion.
Motion by Director Carly Anderson. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Director Schindley. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we officially adjourn for the day. The meetings can also be viewed live on cable channel 188 and live streamed on the district website. Thank you for those attending in person, and have a wonderful evening.